Hey, this is Tyler. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me on this journey and adventure. In our last episode, we discovered that wisdom is at the top of the virtue hierarchy. And then we explored 11 scientifically proven ways to help you stay on top of life and combat nihilism. And finally, we closed with awe and its profound transformative ways of healing and connecting with the divine. Pain and trauma, however, are inevitable threads woven into human existence. Whether it's the sting of loss, the weight of self hatred, or the lingering echoes of unresolved trauma, each of us at some point confronts suffering that feels unbearable. Yet, amid this darkness, there lies an opportunity. It's a call to transform our most painful experiences into a foundation for growth and self discovery. I've come to realize through my own struggles and reflective journeys that facing pain head on is not a sign of weakness, but actually an act of courage. There have been several times in my life where I felt overwhelmed by my own inner demons. Moments of self doubt and despair threatened to drown me in negativity. It was only when I decided to really look at these emotions rather than bury them under layers of numbing that I began to understand my true self. And part of that is in trying to release this series and provide information on what I went through. So each painful experience forced me to question my beliefs about myself and to look at why these emotions were still lingering in my psyche in order for me to rebuild my inner world with a more resilient and honest foundation. So this episode is a necessary journey towards transformation and self understanding. We're here not to glorify pain, but to acknowledge it as an integral part of our lives, one that can serve as the impetus for profound change. In exploring the inevitability of trauma and the persistence of struggle with self hatred, we open the door to a more authentic and empowered existence. So, my goal today is to hopefully pass along wisdom to help you understand that while we may not be able to avoid pain, we have the power to harness it, using every hardship as a stepping stone towards a deeper, more compassionate understanding of ourselves and the world around us. By embracing our pain, we don't just survive, we begin to thrive. And that's a paradox. And it's in this painful process of unlearning what no longer serves us and rebuilding who we truly are that we uncover the transformative potential of our lives. To truly grasp the nature of human suffering, we need to start by defining what pain and trauma really are. Pain isn't just a physical sensation, although we experience it as such. It's also an emotional experience. It's a signal that somewhere inside of us needs attention. Pain, as we mentioned in episode 3, originates in our nociceptors, but our brain is what brings it to our conscious perception. Trauma, on the other hand, whether stemming from a single acute event, as I like to call it a lightning bolt event, or trauma that's accumulated over time, like in the case of neglect, leaves scars that shape our behavior and our sense of self. Acute pain is that immediate, intense burst of discomfort, a sharp reminder that something is wrong, while chronic trauma is a lingering wound, a long-term emotional residue that colors our entire existence if left unaddressed. From an evolutionary standpoint, pain is our body's way of protecting us. It signals danger, prevents us from repeating harmful behaviors, and forces us to address issues that threaten our survival. However, when pain isn't fully processed or resolved, it twists into something much more insidious. Over time, unresolved trauma leads to deep-seated self-hatred and maladaptive behaviors that serve no one, not even the people who endure them. Viktor Frankl, as we've talked about before, along with many other existential philosophers, have argued that the search for meaning in suffering is essential. As a reminder, Frankl's insights, drawn from his harrowing experiences in the concentration camps, remind us that while pain is inevitable, the way that we respond to it either imprisons us or sets us free. In his view, even the most terrible suffering can be transformed into a source of strength and purpose if we find a way to extract meaning from it. Self hatred often emerges as a direct result of unprocessed trauma. When we internalize our negative experiences without understanding or healing them, we create a self narrative that is dominated by feelings of unworthiness and shame. And this internal battle, where our past hurts become a lens through which we view ourselves, can lead to a vicious cycle. The more we hate ourselves, the more we engage in behavior that reinforces that belief, further entrenching our emotional wounds. In this way, trauma isn't just an event in our past, it becomes a living, ongoing influence that can distort our self image and derail our potential for growth. What is interesting for me is that I've used self hatred to goad myself to be the best version of myself. So there's a paradox in suffering and trauma itself. And while it's not exactly healthy to live one's life that way, it certainly has its benefits, in that my own self hatred was an antagonist for doing. And so I have lived much of my life over delivering and constantly moving forward, but from a place of self hatred. It's only in the last couple of years that I, at 44, have finally come to terms with myself and everything that makes up who I am. I say this not just to spew garbage, but to say that this is a really long process. For me, just recognizing my hatred and that it was actually beneficial for me in my career was a really interesting realization. But eventually, it was just eating me from the inside. And I had to come to terms with it to the point where I am now, where I've transformed that into something that's holy. I can now live out a place of gratitude while still harnessing the tools that I've learned in order to constantly create and bring value into the world. The important part was the transformation of that self hatred at its bottom source into something that could be truly accepted so that I can accept who I am. Understanding pain and trauma, therefore, is not about recognizing the inevitability of suffering, but also about finding ways to process it. When we learn to confront our pain, we open the door to transformation. It's a process of unlearning harmful patterns, identities, and beliefs, and rebuilding a more compassionate, resilient self. It's a process that is essential for our survival, as the pain signals that warn us of danger. This journey through suffering is difficult, but as we delve deeper into it, we discover that our greatest growth often comes from that very challenge that we wish we could avoid. And this ties it back into our overall narrative of the hero's journey. So imagine boarding a train that takes you deep into the valley of death, essentially into hell, a journey where every mile traveled is marked by the raw, unfiltered experience of pain and loss into the emptiness of the abyss. I call this the existential train. It's a powerful metaphor for our life's journey, one where confronting the darkness, most challenging aspects of existence, isn't inevitable, but possibly essential for transformation. I briefly mentioned this in the intro in episode 1, but many times you don't want to be on the existential train, and yet you are. Sometimes by your own choices, sometimes due to no fault of your own. When you're on the train, sometimes you get off and you stay in whatever state of numbing or checking out or disconnection that enables you to live your life. But if you ride the train all the way to the bottom, and then you see the light that is possible through the other side, you come into the second half of life where you begin falling upwards. Richard Rohr, in his excellent book, Falling Upwards, offers a powerful perspective on the transformative potential of the second half of life. He explains that the first half of life is often devoted to building a secure identity, achieving, accumulating, and establishing oneself in the world. This phase is largely about constructing our external reality and defending our ego against the uncertainties of life. Now, in contrast, Rohr argues that the second half of life is a time for deconstruction and renewal, a period where we begin to let go of our rigid early life identities and embrace a deeper, more expansive sense of self. This falling upwards is not about failure, but about a necessary collapse of old ways of being, making room for profound spiritual and emotional growth. As we age, we're invited to transcend the limitations of our youthful ambitions and discover a new identity grounded in humility, compassion, and interconnectedness. The pain and losses that we experience along the way, what we might call the exits from our former selves, become the catalysts for our most authentic transformation. Rohr's insights are especially relevant today, where the pressures of success and external validation often overshadow the inner work of self discovery. His message is a reminder that the challenges and inevitable setbacks we face are not signs of defeat, but opportunities to fall upwards, to rise above our past identities, and to live with greater wisdom and purpose. This perspective encourages us to see our lives transition not as losses, but as necessary steps towards a richer, more meaningful experience, where the true work of life is about deepening our connection to ourselves and others, and ultimately to the divine. So, through our falling upwards, every setback, every heartbreak, and every moment of despair serves as fuel that propels us forward, compelling us to confront our vulnerabilities and ultimately to emerge stronger and to come out of the existential train. The very act of traveling through this grim landscape forces us to question our assumptions about who we are and what truly matters in our lives. It's not a pleasant journey, but once you reach the bottom, you really do begin falling upwards and life begins anew. And so it begins to have a uniqueness and a spark and a resilience. It's no longer tied to me, but is tied to a bigger purpose. And I guess part of that is why I'm building this series in the first place. Now, I recognize that many of you may not be at this stage of your journey, and that's okay. But I do want to provide the perspective from my part of the journey and why I created this information in the first place. And closely tied to this journey is the concept of wrestling with God. I love this term. This isn't just about physical combat, but rather a profound internal struggle with the universe's most perplexing and unanswerable questions. It's that moment when you feel as though you're grappling with the divine itself, challenging the forces of fate, suffering, and even your own sanity. This struggle forces us to re-examine our values, reassess our purpose, and redefine our very identity, creating a space for a new narrative in the midst of life's chaos. A powerful biblical illustration of this is found in the story of Jacob. In Genesis 32, Jacob spends a night wrestling with a mysterious figure, commonly interpreted as an angel or even God himself. If we look at the story of Jacob's struggle as not one of physical dominance, but of internal resolve and determination, we bring wisdom to today's problems. As Jacob wrestled, he refused to let go until he received a blessing, an act that symbolized his refusal to yield his true self or his destiny until he had truly come face to face with God. This grueling all-night encounter left Jacob forever changed. He emerged not only with a new name, Israel, but with a profound understanding of the divine. That story is relevant today. Jacob's story resonates because it encapsulates the idea that the hardest battles we face are often within ourselves. Wrestling with God can take the form of confronting our deepest fears and doubts, challenging long-held beliefs, and enduring moments of existential pain, but all within the broader goal of searching for the ultimate good. Like Jacob, we may find that these intense internal conflicts force us to shed old identities and emerge with a clearer, more resilient sense of who we are. This process, while painful, is essential for carving out a space for meaning, a place where we can rebuild and define our existence with newfound strength and wisdom. In embracing the struggle, we are invited to look into the abyss, to question not just the world around us, but our very place within it. It is through these moments of relentless questioning and self-examination that we can begin to understand the true nature of our being and the potential for growth that lies beneath the hidden layers of fear and uncertainty. Just as Jacob's encounter reshaped his destiny, our own internal wrestling, our willingness to engage with life's most challenging questions, can lead us toward a deeper, more authentic understanding of ourselves and the world we inhabit. This intense personal confrontation isn't a modern invention. It echoes throughout history and across cultures. Consider the story of Job, whose faith was relentlessly tested by overwhelming misfortune. Job's experience wasn't merely about enduring pain, it was about facing the darkest, most inexplicable aspects of existence head on. His story teaches us that suffering, while harrowing, can serve as a crucible for transformation, forcing us to question our assumptions, rebuild our inner lives, and ultimately find a deeper sense of purpose, even amid despair. Similarly, Nietzsche himself recognized confronting the void, the existential gap between our desires and the chaotic realities of life, is essential for forging a new path forward. He argued that only by facing the abyss can we break free from the constraints of conventional morality and emerge with a renewed vision for our own potential. These narratives remind us that suffering is not simply an ordeal to be endured, it's a powerful catalyst for personal growth and renewal. When we embrace our struggles and allow them to challenge our most deeply held beliefs, we unlock the potential to reshape ourselves and understanding of the world. In doing so, we not only confront the darkest part of ourselves, but also pave the way for a profound reawakening of spirit and identity. In recognizing the existential train, we acknowledge that life's most significant transformations often arise from its harshest moments. And it's through the crucible of pain, by wrestling with our deepest fears and questioning the very nature of existence, that we can ultimately discover what is most meaningful. This journey, as daunting as it may be, is our invitation to rebuild ourselves, to let go of the superficial, and to commit to a life of deep purpose and transcendence. As we've talked about before, it will cost you everything. But in the rebirth and transformation, you will emerge stronger and more awestruck than you could ever imagine. Neuroplasticity, in our next section, is one of the most fascinating discoveries in neuroscience. It shows us that our brains are not fixed, but are constantly reshaping themselves based upon our experience. Now, in a previous episode, I posited that people don't change in that some aspects of themselves are fixed, but this is not one of those aspects. The ability for us to reinterpret and reshape past parts of our lives is one of the most fundamental ways that we have control over our lives. When we confront and reinterpret traumatic experiences, we activate the brain's natural ability to form new neural connections. This process essentially allows us to rewire pathways that once encoded our pain, enabling us to break free from old, harmful patterns and to create a healthier, more resilient framework. It's our ability to integrate those parts of our past with those aspects of our present. If we go into those past traumatic experiences and we look at them both from the eyes of who we were then and who we are today, it enables us to integrate those past traumas in a way that brings us more into a complete and unified self. It's not easy, but I believe it is necessary if you want to truly live a life well lived. And it's possible because of neuroplasticity. The process of unlearning deeply ingrained, damaging habits is not without its challenges. In fact, the act of rewiring our brain can be as painful as recovering from a physical injury. Just as the body experiences discomfort while healing a broken bone, our emotional and cognitive systems must undergo a period of pain and disorientation when we challenge long held beliefs or patterns of thought. Yet this discomfort is a necessary part of growth. It's the price we pay for evolving into a more integrated and whole version of ourselves. Rewiring your personal narrative is a powerful way to harness neuroplasticity. How we remember and interpret past pain can either trap us in cycles of self-doubt and resentment or liberate us to move forward with newfound wisdom. By engaging in practices like therapeutic storytelling, journaling, or guided reflection, we actively participate in the transformation of our inner story. These techniques allow us to reassess our experiences, challenge the assumptions we've built around our trauma, and ultimately craft a narrative that empowers rather than confines us. The power of reinterpretation lies in its ability to turn our vulnerabilities into sources of strength. By consciously choosing to enter into and see our traumatic experiences through the lens of growth and resilience, we not only alleviate the hold of past pain, but also enrich our understanding of ourselves while integrating us more wholly. Each time we revisit and reframe a painful memory, we create a new neural pathway that reinforces adaptive, positive patterns. And over time, these new pathways can help us respond to future challenges with greater flexibility and wisdom, transforming what once paralyzed us into a wellspring of resilience and insight. In essence, the journey of neuroplasticity is about embracing the inevitable pain of unlearning and relearning while recognizing that every step in this process is an investment in our future well being. It's a testament to the remarkable capacity of the human brain and spirit to adapt, heal, and ultimately thrive despite the scars of the past. I don't say this lightly, and I don't say do this on your own. Many times, guided trauma healing is necessary for this. And you may need someone who can actually provide you with substantial ability to help you through the process. But ultimately, I think it is necessary for all of us to be able to look at our past selves in order to reinterpret our past stories. And that's not easy. I want to acknowledge that it's not easy. Our resistance to change isn't merely a byproduct of fear, it's a deliberate choice. We cling to our pain and insecurities because they provide a comfortable, if painful, familiarity. In essence, we live in our suffering because embracing change means taking on the heavy burden of responsibility. It demands that we confront the ugly, hidden parts of ourselves, those aspects we'd rather keep secret, rather than retreating into the safety of our old habits. This reluctance is not because transformation is impossible, but because it requires a level of courage that many of us find daunting. The process of change involves dismantling the structures of our identity that, while flawed, have defined us for so long. In doing so, we risk losing the very ground that makes us feel secure, even if that ground is built on our insecurities. We prefer the comfort of our own unhealed wounds because they allow us to avoid the messy and often painful journey of self reinvention. Yet, as difficult as it is to face our inner demons, this confrontation is essential. We're called to a higher responsibility. It's a call echoed in the archetype of Christ, who willingly bore his cross despite the unimaginable suffering it entailed. Like Christ, we must face our existential terror and choose to transform rather than remain mired in complacency. When we step into the unknown and embrace our pain, we initiate a metamorphosis, much like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, emerging as something stronger, wiser, and more authentic than before. And ultimately, insight challenges us to recognize that our avoidance of change is not a sign of weakness, but a significant obstacle to true growth. We must learn to welcome the struggle, understanding that the courage to change is not only the path out of the cycle of suffering. Only by facing our pain head on can we begin to heal, rewiring our narrative, and step into a future filled with genuine possibility. Next, let's talk about strategies for transformation. So, acknowledgement is probably the first and most vital step in the journey to healing. We must confront the reality that we're broken in certain ways and recognize that we cannot mend ourselves entirely in isolation. This realization isn't a defeat, it's a call to action. By acknowledging our vulnerabilities and the need for help, we open the door to true transformation. And this can be a very humbling experience because by acknowledging and looking at ourselves into the abyss, there may not be much of us left that we see as valuable. And there may need to be a lot of us that needs to burn away in the fire. But if only 5% remains, that 5% will be incredibly strong. And it will be a foundation upon which you can build and grow upon. Mindfulness and acceptance are powerful practices that help us observe our painful thoughts without being consumed by them. Mindfulness teaches us to notice our feelings and sensations as they arise. creating a space between stimulus and reaction from that primitive brain to our prefrontal cortex. This space is crucial because it allows us to respond with clarity rather than impulsivity, rather than being overwhelmed by our pain or running from our pain, but to see it and feel it and acknowledge it without judgment. It took me a very long time and a lot of healing to come to the point where I could experience my emotion and my pain just as it was and is, rather than trying to deflect or hide or numb or check out. And I've done a lot of it. But it's possible. And it begins with a small incremental step that builds over time. Therapeutic tools such as professional therapy, meditation, and support groups provide structured methods to process trauma and shift our internal narratives. These approaches offer not just insight, but also practical strategies to reframe our experiences and foster deeper self-compassion. They remind us that healing is not a solitary endeavor, but a process that flourishes with guidance and community support. I'm a big fan of counseling. Likewise, I'm a big fan of finding someone whom you trust, who you can talk to, and who is trying to help you navigate the complexities of your life in a way that can help you move forward. I even think that just sharing a journal with AI agents these days can remarkably provide everyone with so much healing and potential. As AI is unjudgmental, it doesn't really care what you think, but it genuinely does want to help us. And that's what they're programmed to do. And so I really think that there's a bright future for AI and human alignment in transforming much of our brokenness through self-journaling and conversation. And I highly suggest you do so. But be compassionate with yourself. And again, for some people, this isn't going to be the best methodology. And you may need a different path. But for me, it's been incredibly rewarding in the self-discovery process. Likewise, daily practices play a key role in reinforcing a new, healthier narrative. Reflective journaling, for instance, lets us track our thoughts and progress over time, while cognitive reframing exercises challenge negative patterns and cultivating a more positive outlook. In the spirit of ideas from Atomic Habits, small changes like placing a guitar by your bedside if you want to play a guitar encourage you to keep practicing because it's easily accessible. Likewise, keeping unhealthy snacks out of sight and out of the house can make a significant difference because it's harder to access them. By making our good habits more accessible and our bad habits more difficult, we gradually shift our behavior in the direction of growth. I find many people probably need to do this with their technology, especially their cell phones and social media. And so just making it harder to access enables you to break a habitual cycle that is ingrained in who you are, and potentially enables you to break out of numbing patterns or checking out patterns that would enable you to further grow. Finally, building resilience means embracing discomfort as an inevitable part of the growth process. Each incremental step, no matter how small, accumulates over time, leading to significant change. We don't see it day one, but by day 100, we're almost on a path to rechange who we are. It's about learning to live with the discomfort of change, understanding that the process of rewiring our brain and unlearning old damaging patterns is as challenging and necessary as physical healing. Ultimately, the practices we adopt become the foundation of a resilient life, one where our past trauma is transformed into the strength and wisdom that propels us forwards. But it is a choice that we need to make. It's not something that we reluctantly stumble into. It needs to be a conscious choice that we step into, that we embrace our pain, and that we push through it in order to come out the other side. Now, throughout history, pain has been a central, if harrowing, experience of the human condition. A challenge that every culture, and particularly Christianity, has struggled to explain. C.S. Lewis among others, wrestled with this seeming contradiction of a benevolent, omnipotent God allowing suffering. For many, the problem of pain presents an existential puzzle. If life is meant to be good, why does suffering exist? In traditional Christian theology, pain is often seen as a consequence of free will, a means to test and refine our souls. However, this view can leave us with more questions than answers about the inherent nature of our suffering. An alternative narrative emerges when we view pain through the lens of evolution. It's a process of constant change, adaptation, and growth. In this framework, pain is not merely a punitive force or a random misfortune. It's an essential catalyst that drives survival and transformation. Just as natural selection weeds out unfit traits, the experience of pain forces us to adapt, learn, and ultimately evolve. This evolutionary perspective reframes suffering as an intrinsic part of life's progress rather than an inexplicable anomaly. And this is where the concept of the omega point, as we've talked about at length, comes back into play. The omega point posits that evolution is not an aimless process, but one that is converging towards a state of greater complexity, unity, and consciousness. In this view, the trials and tribulations we endure, including pain and loss, are not merely obstacles, but necessary steps along a transformative path. The challenges we face compel us to develop resilience, empathy, and a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Far from being a sign of divine failure, pain becomes a signal that evolution is actively at work, sculpting us into beings capable of higher order thought and profound connection. By embracing this perspective, we shift our understanding of pain and transform that pain from an enemy to be vanquished to a vital process that contributes to our ultimate growth. The very hardships that once seemed insurmountable now reveal themselves as opportunities for personal and collective evolution. Our journey through suffering is, in essence, the crucible on which we are refined, a process that, when fully integrated, leads us towards the omega point, where life, in all of its complexity, finds its most fulfilling expression in God. In this light, pain is not an aberration, but a necessity, albeit difficult, component of the human story, a testament to our ongoing struggle against entropy and the relentless drive towards higher consciousness. As we come to terms with the inevitability of suffering, we are also invited to reframe our pain as fuel for transformation, the very energy that propels us towards a future of greater meaning and unity. So, as we conclude this episode, remember that true transformation arises when we face our pain head on and reinterpret it as a catalyst for growth. Our deepest wounds, the moments when we feel most broken, are not endpoints but gateways to profound change. Although the journey through trauma is undeniably painful, it is also essential for building a resilient, authentic self. By confronting and understanding our suffering, we lay the groundwork for long-lasting transformation, one that refines our future and reshapes our inner world. I invite you to take a moment for honest self-reflection. Identify an area of unresolved pain in your life, a lingering sorrow, a traumatic memory, or a recurring self-defeating belief, and consider how facing it might actually open the door to healing and growth. Ask yourself, what is one painful truth that you've been avoiding? What might happen if you embraced it instead of letting it define you? It's not a call for reckless confrontation of pain, but a deliberate, measured step towards transforming your life narrative. In our next episode, the quest for identity, beauty, risk, and the discovery of self will shift our focus from the internal struggle with pain to the vibrant journey of rediscovering who we are. We'll explore how the lessons learned from our deepest hurts can ignite our passions, clarify our interests, and reveal our unique identity. In this exploration, we'll show us how to harness the transformative power of our inner struggles, turning what once weighed us down into the very fuel that propels us towards a more authentic, fulfilling life. Before we part, I leave you with this reflexive question. What painful truth have you been avoiding along the journey of the existential train? And how might embracing it steer you towards a more authentic self? So again, thanks for joining me on this journey and adventure. I'm glad you're here. I look forward to our next encounter, and good luck on your own journey.